So then off we are, no probleming, and I'm just saying yes and whatever. And then you're kind of like, at the end of the night, who are
Mhm.
you sniping at? You're
Yeah.
not sniping at the random person who asked you to be, take on this extra project. You're
Yeah.
sniping at your partner, or you're
Yeah.
short with your kids, or, like the people who you should be like having the most time, love, and attention for are the ones who are kind of getting the irritability. And I think that is the first kind of like shot across the bow that I need to kind of step back. And I think that one of the things I really learned quickly is that it's very easy to say yes, and that's great. Much more challenging to say no, and to do it in a way that isn't rude, or and I think no is a complete sentence. I'll say
Mhm.
that, but to really challenge yourself to be like, how does this fit in with all of the other things that matter to me? And if it doesn't fit in, then the answer needs to be no.
Welcome back, folks, to the Executive Excel podcast. I'm excited to have Dr. Denise Brown here today, with over 3 decades of experience in healthcare as a physician and a CEO and Chief Strategy Officer. She is a transformative leader who helps women in business learn how to prioritize and avoid maternal overwhelm. A thought leader in self-care activities for women, she brings her expertise to in her books, rather, for successful women. And she's a graduate of the University of Chicago's Pritzker School of Medicine with training at both Stanford and Vanderbilt. She lives with Alex, her childhood sweetheart of 28 years, and their sons, Will and Hank. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Good. Now, do you like to be called Doctor or Denise or which one?
I go really by anything. So yeah, Denise is just fine.
As a former ER nurse, I can conclude that we can be called anything. So it's all good.
That's the truth.
Well, welcome to the show. I'm super excited to have you. This is a really near and dear topic to my heart. I have 3 kids of my own, struggled with burnout, did the things. And so this is a really topical conversation, I think, today. Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah,
And
it totally is. And I love to start with you, the guest, first. So you've got this career in healthcare, you've got this leadership and CEO sort of background, but when someone's not reading your resume, how do you like to present yourself to other people?
oh, isn't that fun? I would say most of all, I am a really good friend and a person who makes people laugh. And most of the time, people who don't really know me have no idea that I'm a doctor or that I run businesses or any of that kind of type stuff. That I am really less interested, especially the older I get, in what you do. I'm more interested in who you are, and I think that kind of comes out pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah. So you've shared some work online around selling your company in 2023. My understanding that was a major milestone. So what kind of prompted you to do that? What was the precipice behind that?
Oh, well, I mean, private equity tells you what to do when they want you to do it. So
Uh,
you either do it or you don't.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've had a very interesting career. I mean, I had a very sort of clinical, kind of by the book, residency, started a practice,
Mm.
rolled that into a larger practice, ended up running that, made it a much bigger practice, sort of all over the US, kind of like not a completely traditional medical world, but sort of this transition into business. And then ultimately, was recruited to run this company, which was really interesting and outside of my comfort zone. But I've never been a person who sort of thinks, oh, well, I don't have all the answers, so I have to wait until I do. I've always been like, yes, and I think this comes from working in the emergency room and in the ICU and stuff. Yes, and I'm gonna take it as it comes, and we'll change our plans as necessary based on new information, kind of type thing.
Yeah.
And so then I ended up running a company, and then we decided, just based on the market and whatnot, that even though we had expected to hold on to it until 2025, that the timing was right to go out, and so that's what we did. And I decided for the first time ever to take some time off, which I had never done. So
Right.
I took some time off, and that's when I decided to write my book. Was in this kind of, I lasted about 3 months of quote unquote, doing nothing before I was like, oh, okay, so what are we doing today?
Yeah. Yeah. I love the name of your book, by the way. I have full transparency. I haven't read it yet, folks, but I'm sure it's just by the name of it, I'm just enamored. So what prompted you to come up with this book? And I just, again, where'd you come up with the name? Because I absolutely love it.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
Well, so it's called The Fairy God Doctor's Guide to a Good Life. It actually came out of, just like most things, come from when you least expect it.
Mhm.
I was interviewed by a magazine and they wanted to, after the sale of the company, they were like, oh, we're interviewing exit entrepreneurs. There's not a lot of women CEOs who've sold companies. And, we'd really like to talk to you. Oh, that sounds great. Some young, like probably 28, 29-year-old woman is interviewing me. And she wants to know what my legacy is. And I was like, what are you
You're
talking
like, wait a minute, I'm not that old.
and it was just really an interesting question. She's like, well, what is your legacy? And I said,
Right.
do you mean in regards to this company? Like, I was like, I'm sorry, I don't understand your question. And she goes, no, like your work, your legacy. And I was like, oh, and I'm not a male basher in any way. I'm happily married. I have two boys, like I love men in all their forms. And I was like, you must mainly talk to men, is what I'm thinking when you ask this question. I said, my legacy and my work have absolutely nothing to do with one another. And so
Right.
then that sort of prompted this whole other conversation. And one thing led to another. And I was like, my legacy is that I've really led a good life and I've tried to help other people do that. And really, what I was put here to do is make other people feel better, whether it's
Right.
as a doctor or as a mom or as a friend or whatever. That is my life's work. And I
Yeah.
have a few foundational principles on how that happens. And so then she's like, okay, tell me more, like any good journalist. And one thing leads to another. And then she's like, oh, I have to ask you some questions. I don't know what to do with my life. And here, and then she was like, we start talking. And she was like, I wish you would write this down. And I was like, oh, I had never even thought about that. But then I thought, well, what if I did write my sort of prescriptions for a good life? Like, what could that look like? And like I said, it was 3 months in, I was kind of bored. So I was like, what the heck? Let's do it.
Yeah. I love that. Gosh, I love that. It's such a great story because that's often how life is, isn't it? Like
Oh,
someone will say to you, "Hey, you should do that. You should write a book," and you're like, "What? I never thought about writing a book." So I think that's amazing. That's awesome.
and I
Um,
actually talk to my book. So when you do read it, I would, or if you don't like to read, which I totally get, I'm not a huge like read the self-help stuff, and it's not really self-help. But I hate most like businessy books because like the first part of the book is really good, and the end of the book is really good, and then the middle, you're just like, I want to poke myself in the eye with a needle. And I can imagine you and I have a similar kind of.
get to the beat,
Yeah.
please.
So I was like, it's only going to be meat. Like we're like all meat, no bread here. And so it's short. And that was on purpose. It's 170 pages if you're reading it. But if you listen to it at like time and a half, which is I think a normal speaking kind of cadence, it's like not even 3 hours. And I read it
Oh
and it's pretty funny. And anyway, so it's one car trip of time invested.
yeah, but the length of a book is not necessarily. I love the fact that you've kept it concise
Oh
because
yeah.
if you can, I'm a big fan of if you can get a positive impact in the shortest amount of time possible. That I'm a huge fan of that. And I think a lot of people, especially busy leaders, just don't have time
You don't
to
have the
read
time.
like
I mean,
novellas on how to take care of yourself. It's not there.
no,
Yeah,
thank you. Mm-mm,
yeah,
mm-mm. And
yeah,
what's interesting is, I think, I've got 7 prescriptions. They tie a lot to your 6 pillars. It's really kind of funny. I think,
yeah.
when you've been around the sun as many times as I have, and after a while, like you kind of everybody sort of arrives at a common pathway. Maybe there are different avenues to get there, but lots of similarities in, what it is that you're doing and how to manage your time and how to tell people no and all that kind of type stuff.
Yeah, all the sort of the critical pieces that helped me at least out of my burnout experience, and now
Yeah.
I sort of take the same tools, collate it in sort of a program, and then sort of help other people in the process. So then you've written this great book. I'm sure you're getting positive feedback from it. So then tell us a little more, dive a little deeper on sort of how you're continuing to support these high performing women that are in these roles that are maybe feeling a little overwhelmed by, trying to juggle all the balls. And
Yeah.
be honest, some of them are falling at times.
Well, and that's fine. I think that's the number one thing is it's fine to drop some of the balls. Like we have this sort of mentality that, we're supposed to like be doing many things and then take on 7 more.
Yeah.
For me, the goal of my book was I think there are a lot of really fabulous experts out there in and around burnout. Natalie Kogan. I mean, there's some really amazing people. I was like, what if we could prevent it to begin with and
Yeah.
start earlier? And so the goal of my book really is for that kind of 25 to 35-year-old who is just sort of getting started and ramping up into really what can either be the building blocks for a really good life or the pathway to burnout, right? Because it's the like they start off very similarly, and without that kind of like mindset and then also ability to kind of juggle and not feel bad about it, I think you can easily end up in the same place. So that was sort of who I was thinking about. And the fairy god doctor comes from all of my fairy god children who tease me and call me the fairy god doctor. So it's like I have all of these delightful, and I call them children, even though they're not. So I mean no offense to them, but they know that they're like my soul children who are
Mhm.
basically that same age, and it's like
Right.
sometimes it's hard to talk to your mom. She's a little bit too old, but I'm only like 15 years older than you. Like there's there's a little more commonality, and also it doesn't feel quite so like here's what we end up talking about. And so that was kind of how the book came about. And really it's about reiterating these messages, because it's one thing, you can read it, you can hear it, you can practice it, but then when the pressure mounts and the steam is rattling the lid of the pot, it's really easy to kind of fall back into either societal patterns, which I think are very strong, or your old kind of, whatever crap you brought to the table. So how do you sort of like just kind of go back and revisit it and sort of
Mhm.
gather yourself? Like I love to ride horses. So it's like before you can kind of take off and gallop across a pasture, right? You have to
Mhm.
collect yourself and your horse. You have to kind of bring it together and then off you go. So
Yeah.
what does that look like? And sometimes, things go crazy. And so what you need to do is pause and
Yeah.
recollect and then gallop off again. So that's the sort of thinking and the work that I try to do with my I mean, I hate to call them mentees, but whatever, with my people. We'll call them my people.
It's as if you've taken a public health approach to burnout as
Yeah.
opposed to medicine approach, which is a pound of prevention is worth, or prevention is
Mhm.
worth a pound of cure, or whatever, however that
Mhm.
goes. So the idea is to try to get ahead of the curve. So one of the things that I have to reiterate to people that I work with who are highly performant people is that they'll say, "Well, I'm not burned out. I'm not burned out. I'm functioning just fine. I go to work, I do my things." And I'm like, "Well, hold on a second now. You came to me for this one problem, but then if we start to examine, there are, and I think you may have mentioned this somewhere, but there are whispers that show up
Oh,
you,
oh,
right? So, because a lot of people think that burnout is this big crash and burn. And in some cases, for me, it was. The second time it was a crash and burn. I was on my ass for 8 weeks. Like I did nothing when I pulled the retirement card from my six-figure income. I needed to rest. And then I went to the whole therapy stuff, like therapy, somatics, breath work, did all the things to kind of get myself back on track. What are some of those early whispers? The early differential diagnosis, what is those early whispers that starts to show that your risk factors for burnout are now increasing? So maybe share some of your experience, maybe pull in some of that, I would say, a medical lens to it, but really it's not about diagnosing so much as it's about just letting people in on what those whispers are so that they can start to
yeah.
recognize it for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think part of the problem, right, is when you're talking about high performing people, they're high performing people.
Yeah.
I mean, that in and of itself is the issue.
Yeah.
So, who do you want to give another project to, or a different thing, or who do you want to volunteer for the room mom, right? The high performing person.
Of
And
course.
you get in a little bit of an ego circle
Hmm.
because people are counting on you. You are the go-to person. Like that makes your ego feel good. And it should. I mean, that's great. But if you're not really careful and you don't sort of decide, okay, well, it's really lovely that people are coming to me. Does this actually, like, is this something I actually want, or is it something I think I'm supposed to want? Like,
Mm.
how do we get really granular there? Then if you don't sort of have that honest conversation with yourself, then of course your ego's going to win, and you can be like, oh yeah, I'd be happy to do that, no problem. So then off we are, no probleming, and I'm just saying yes and whatever. And then you're kind of like, at the end of the night, who are
Hmm.
you sniping at? You're
Yeah.
not sniping at the random person who asked you to be take on this extra project, you're
Yeah.
sniping at your partner, or you're
Yeah.
short with your kids, or, like the people who you should be like having the most time, love, and attention for are the ones who are kind of getting the irritability. And I think that is the first kind of like shot across the bow that I need to kind of step back. And I think that one of the things I really learned quickly is that it's very easy to say yes, and that's great. Much more challenging to say no, and to do it in a way that isn't rude, and I think no is a complete sentence. I'll say
Mhm.
that, but to really challenge yourself to be like, how does this fit in with all of the other things that matter to me? And if it doesn't fit in, then the answer needs to be no. And so sometimes in the moment, it's easier to just be like, oh, sure.
Mhm.
So I think to say to people, yes, I'm honored to take that on. I need the weekend. I need blank time to think
Mhm.
about it. And then to actually go back and be honest. Like, first
Yeah.
of all, do I really care about being the room mom? Or do I really, does this really matter to me? Because you can't have 17 priorities. That the word priority means like one
Yeah.
or maybe two.
Two tops. Yeah, exactly.
After
Yeah.
that, it's just a to-do list. So what does that actually mean to you? And I can't answer that for you, but like the idea of being very mindful about that, I think that's the real skill. And the earlier you start to flex that muscle, the stronger it gets. And so that's where I'm trying to get at, and it doesn't matter. You can start any time, but I'm like, if my 25-year-old self knew this.
Yeah.
So
Your 25-year-old self also didn't go through perimenopause and get the give a shit factor kind of goes out the window when you get to a certain age. Let's be
well,
frank.
and so that's just it. I mean, in a way, and I talk a lot about this in my book. My mom died when I was 20. I guess I was just about to turn 25. So
Right.
in a way, that was kind of the like, I don't give a blank quick,
Yeah.
like, so that was the gift of her passing, was that
Right.
I sort of did jump ahead to that. And you're right. I mean, that's what you want. We want all of these young women to have this kind of like, I don't actually care what you think of me. I care what I think of me. I care about what the people who love me think of me. The rest of you can also just F off.
Yeah.
So, what does that take? And again, that doesn't mean you're cavalier and rude or any of that, but it
No.
just means that I know what matters to me. I know what matters to the people I love, and I'm going to defend that savagely if I have to.
Yeah, the deep need to self-evaluate everything, all your choices that you're making relative to what really matters to you
Yes.
is always key. And one thing I realize is that, and especially because I mean, I bookended my career with COVID OG, which was SARS back in
Ours.
2003, and COVID 2.0. And both had their challenges, but I was in a very different space 18 years before, where I was
Mhm.
keen and I wanted out of the emergency department. So when I was offered an opportunity to join the federal government to deal with quarantine services, I was like, yeah, no more shift work. Are you kidding me? I'm in. I'm like, no more name calling, no more hair pulling, no more whatever. And so I went into it very kind of wanting to take on the world. And I mean, we worked long hours during SARS, and that wasn't even a fraction, a piece of, right? And
Yeah.
mind you, I'm in Canada, so we had cases in Toronto. There was active situations going on here that we had to deal with. But the reality is COVID 2.0 just knocked the crap out of me. And
Yeah.
it was when I started to realize that I was spending zero time with my family.
Right.
I had literally no relationship with my kids.
Yep.
Marriage is strong, so we were able to resist and get through, but I was having to depend on him for everything, meals. I mean, it's not like we don't have traditional roles in our house. We tend to share pretty equally, but suddenly he was doing everything, which was exhausting for him too. And so it just came to a breaking point for us.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so I
I
love
mean,
that you're
makes
working with
perfect
people
sense.
at an earlier age, because that, if you can start to get these habits, like you say, it is a muscle. If you can start to work these things out earlier, it just saves you so much effort. Because I can tell you right now, just in all the clients I work with or have worked with, probably I would easily say anywhere from 60 to 70% of them, this is just anecdotal, have issues with their marriage.
Yeah, so that's actually really, I mean, we could talk a lot about that because I actually think it's a big deal.
It is a
Um,
big deal.
and it's in it's my chapter 6. Um, um, but part of our issue with this high performing thing is high performers are also controllers.
Yeah.
We just are, right? And the best way to get something done is for me to do it myself. Well, what an assholio statement that actually is if you walk it back, right? But like, let's be honest. I know it's true. You know it's true. I mean, come on. The fastest and best way for anything to get done is for me to do it myself.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's really just slap ourselves in the face about that. I think a lot of the marriage issues stems from exactly that.
Yep.
I have a whole section in my book about folding towels and how one folds a towel. Now, you and I both know that the only way to fold a towel is in thirds because then it looks very nice on the shelf. Okay, you and I know this.
Hey, so you read my mind, hon, because that's exactly right. There's no other way.
There's no other way.
There's no other
My
way.
husband is like, it's a rectangle. And so you fold it in half and then in half and then in half and
What
you
a
put it right.
monster. How dare he?
How dare he? So, we've been around and around about this towel business. And finally, I was just like, what do I actually care? I mean, Martha Stewart's not coming and looking at my linen closet. If he folded the towels and he put them away, do I actually give a cockadoodle-doo about how it gets done, right? So what actually matters? So part of our problem is we are our own worst enemy. We're running around saying, oh, you didn't stack the dishwasher right, or this is how you do it, or like people accept minimum viable effort. Like if you didn't have to do the job yourself, don't complain about how it got done. Like be more outcome oriented and forget about the process. And I am convinced that like 80% of this marital yipping has to do with these weird and stupid process things that in all honesty are, and I will say, are my own control issues and my 100% certainty that I know what I'm doing better than you. So like, what if you just decided not to do that?
That requirement is what made you an excellent physician, because it was an attention to detail and doing things in a particular order when you're testing and validating a treatment series, right? So it makes sense. But I also would agree, I also would add to that the control that we exercise in our homes as women is often because we lack control in other areas of our life. So we're trying to
Yeah,
insert control where we
yeah.
can.
I
But
think
you're
that's a
right.
super important point. Super important.
And embrace the good enough. A good colleague of mine, a funny story, when we were doing our leadership masters together at Royal Roads University out in BC, British Columbia, we were doing this group project, and me being type A and being controlling, it was like, well, we have to do it this way and it has to be that way. And there's no like flexibility. And, you can figure out where I sit in my, Myers-Briggs. But anyways, so I was like, we got to do this. And I remember she turned to me, and her name's Nikki. She's great. I love her to death. She's such a good colleague and friend. She says to me, Tammy, take a deep breath. This is before I did any breath work. Take a deep breath. Just embrace the good enough. It's going to be
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
At first I was like, shut the hell up. Embrace the good enough.
Right.
How is that kind of advice? But it was a great point. And you know what? It's a statement I come back to over and over and over again. I was doing it with my kids just the other day. Embrace the good enough.
Yeah. And so for us, it's like, oh, let's go fold some towels because I think this is like, it's actually more profound than you realize because not only is it good for, sort of home harmony, but when you really start to think about it, and I'm not suggesting that every woman out there working is a mother or whatever, but like it is a tremendous differentiator in parenting and in managing people. So people who are control freaks are either helicopters or snowplows. And that's either at work or at home with your kids. You're either doing everything for them because you want it to be exactly correct, or you're pushing all the problems out of the way because you want it to be easy. And what are you actually teaching your children or your employees? They can't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not capable, and you need to be supervising. Is that really the message that we want to be giving the people we care about or the people who work for us? No. The point of it is is the towels need to be put away. You figure out how to make that happen. I'm willing to give you a little suggestion here and there, but then I'm going to let you go do it, right? That's how you raise an independent child. That's how you raise a workforce who wants to get up and come to the job every day and
Yeah.
do more for you. So it's really like, it seems silly, but like, it's a big deal.
It's a
And it's
perfect analogy of
really,
what really happens.
yeah.
It's a perfect analogy. That's exactly what happens is this need to control the narrative. And I just briefly I want to talk about before we get too far into this, because this week I have a feeling I could probably talk to you for hours about this stuff. But the notion of having it all, and one of the things I realized very, very quickly was, and the bubble burst for me on the notion of work-life balance, which is utter garbage in my opinion. This notion that we can be balanced in all things is not appropriate or accurate. I think I love the word integration, work-life integration, like a seesaw. Some days it's like this, some days it's like that. The goal is to constantly stay in flow. It should never just be like this, which is what work was for me. I was always at the bottom of the seesaw with work, and nothing else was being managed or led or so. I would love your perspective on this because I know you have your own experience with this. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on the notion of work-life balance and or this sort of like myth of having it all, or maybe you can have it all, but just not all at the same time. So I'd just like to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, chapter 2 of my book is There Is No Balance.
I have to read your book. Of clearly.
So yeah, I mean, balance. Like it's a
Right.
mythical land filled with unicorns who are, tooting out rainbows. There is no such thing as balance. I do believe you can have it all, but you
Yeah.
cannot do it all.
Okay. So I love that distinction. Maybe dive a little deeper on that.
So, first of all, what is your all? Your all is different
Yeah.
than my all. And you owe it to yourself to really figure out what that is. And it's
Right.
not just like, oh, I want a big house and I want to drive a Lexus and have 2.5 kids and a golden retriever. Like, no, that is what the societal expectation of like what is actually really matters to you. When you are either on your deathbed, or I like to think of it as it's my 85th birthday, I'm sitting on the porch with my girlfriends and we're all talking about, what were the best, what were the best of times. Like that, those are the things. Like no one's sort of saying, oh, and I worked really hard. And there's all sorts of, societal, what do you do in the dash, all that kind of type stuff. But really, what actually matters to you? And then what time does it actually take to be able to kind of nurture that? And so for me, I mean, when I was starting a practice, I mean, it's like running your own business in the US, right? And I had all these other doctors who were working with me, and I had little kids, and I had a lot of things that were competing. And so what I literally had to figure out was what actually mattered. And I decided that first and foremost, I needed some time for me. I needed half an hour that was just going to be mine. And I was going to find it however I found it. I needed a half an hour. I needed a half an hour with my husband. And I needed at least 1 hour with my kids. And for me, that was like dinner time, bath time, stories, and bed when they were little. And I was a hospitalist. I ran a hospitalist program. We were not in a massive, hospital, and it was very early on in the kind of hospitalist days, right? It wasn't nearly as kind of institutionalized as it is now. This is very early 2000s. And so what I would do if I were the on-call person, I would start at the kind of least sick floor. So the med surge, I would start at med surge, then I go to cardiac, then I go to the ICU, just checking in, how's everything going? Like just making sure, what are we doing? Then I go to the ER and I'd be like, what's going on? Okay, I'm gonna go home. I'll be back in 90 minutes. Everyone's like, no problem. I mean, my kids were their kids, like I was pregnant there, I delivered my babies there. Like we were all kind of in it to win it together. I
Yeah.
go home, put the kid in the bathtub, sing him his songs, nurse him, whatever, put him back to bed, get back on my bicycle, right back to the hospital, and I'd be there until I didn't need to be there anymore, right? But like that was like protected time, and I knew it. And so it was 2 hours out of 24.
Yeah.
Like you can do that, right? What I didn't have was this stupid thing. I wasn't spending like 8 hours on Instagram. So
Yeah.
I think you have to learn how to be indistractable from all the other crap, but you also have to like really articulate what are the things that actually matter the most. Now, I was like, exercise, I don't know how I'm going to do that. That's why I rode my bike. It's like, how could I stack? This was before habit stacking was a thing, but like, how could I kind of kill as many birds with, as few stones as possible? And that was also my think time. So I wasn't like listening to a podcast on my way to work. I was like letting my brain kind of do its thing. But like that's the stuff that mattered. And then as the kids got older, it was easy to get distracted. It was like, oh, can you be the auctioneer for the preschool? Can you do this? Can you do that? And I was like, all right, well, what actually matters? Well, what mattered to me was doing my little co-op preschool on Tuesdays. So I changed my entire schedule around so that I could be at their school on Tuesdays. That really mattered to me. And I rearranged the schedule to make that happen. I decided I hated cooking dinner. So I asked the other girls in my neighborhood how much they hated cooking dinner. And then we all got together and we decided on Tuesdays, because that was my school day, I would cook dinner for 3 families. And on Monday, someone else would do it. And on Wednesday, so we rotated. And so I only cooked dinner once a week. So we worked smarter together. And I go into this a lot in the book on these like strategies of like protecting your time and protecting those things that you think you really care about. The only person who can do it is you.
Yeah, the element of bringing in community, that is super important. I think it's such an important point that you're bringing in here is, and I love the phrase that you used, you can have it all, you just can't do it all. I love that because it means that you need to depend, and that's hard for controllers, but you need to learn how to depend on other people so that you can get the things done. And I love that. That's such a great initiative too, because I hate making meals as well. In fact, Ralph makes the meals around here the most because I can't stand cooking dinner. It's just one of those things. And so we, the notion of creating this sort of community of people who support each other. What a great idea.
And you can find it in a lot of different places. I mean, we were lucky. We all kind of lived across the street from one another. And, it started off as this kind of like supper thing. And we just bought a bunch of like the same kind of like glassware. And the rule was you had to drop supper off between 5:30 and 6. Didn't necessarily have to stay and chat. If you had time, that was great. But otherwise, you just had to drop it off on the porch. So there was no expectation of, lingering or whatever. And then you just used that glassware, just kind of made it its way around. So we tried to like eliminate. But I got to tell you, it wasn't always the greatest dinner, but it was fine. Like Wednesdays was Steph's night, and she was always like with the crock pot, but everything was always dry. We were all kind of like, she's like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but we're like, who cares? We're just going to eat it. And so it's good for us because we were all 3 control freaks to sort of learn to kind of let go of the, like every meal doesn't have to be Instagrammable, like sometimes you just need to eat dinner. And then that quickly transitioned into babysitting because we were like, why are we trying to hire babysitters when all the kids could just come to my house this Friday night and go to your house next Friday night? And so now suddenly you got a date night that you were not anticipating, and so it ends up like, can really steamroll. And so I did a book club at Boston Consulting Group, like talk about high powered, really incredibly intelligent women. And the one was like, well, that would be great, but no one in my neighborhood would do that. And I'm like, well, you guys are all here. You all come into the office every day. Like, bring your dinner. And she was like, so you just have to go find it. But somebody has to be brave enough to go first. Somebody has to be like, I'm at my wit's end. Here's what's actually driving me crazy. Working all day and then coming home and trying to be like, what the am I going to make for dinner? So that was what prompted it. So like what, it could be something different for you. I don't know, but it's worthwhile asking.
It's a call out to all the leaders out there. If you're already a high performing leader in the workplace, you're already making decisions. You're already taking risks. You're already doing the things. So what's one more decision?
Yeah.
What's one more decision to enable yourself with maybe a little bit more freedom at the end of the road, right? So that works out really well. Starting to close out here, if you could offer, I know this is a big question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. If you could offer one prescription, one essential mindset shift or a daily practice for that working woman who's listening to this today, maybe she's in healthcare, maybe she's not, she's feeling pulled in every direction, what would it be? And it's a big question, I know. Read your book. That would be number one.
Well, number one would be read the book or just listen to it on your way in. At least that way you're driving and you're listening. Putting yourself at number one, I know that sounds like a ridiculous little, bumper sticker, whatever. It actually makes everything better.
Right.
And we are constantly pushing ourselves to the side, both mentally and physically and even emotionally. That's your path to burnout is when you keep pushing yourself aside. Like give yourself that half hour, 45 minutes or whatever it is, but you actually do need to come first in all ways. But that really is the deal. If work isn't working for you, And because you like the classic I get a lot is, yeah, well, I'm always so stressed out by the time I get to work because, we have that all hands meeting and it's at 8:30. And I was like, oh my God, that is a nightmare. Like 8:30 is the worst possible time to have a meeting. Well, your boss probably doesn't know that because your boss doesn't have little kids that are getting dropped off at school anymore. Or he had a wife, or they, who knows? But like if you just say, you know what, 8:30 is a really difficult time for quite a few of us. Would it be possible to move that meeting to 9? And you don't have to say, no, 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 just would it be possible?
Yeah.
And I think that is like a friendly, nice way of acknowledging your sort of needs and the fact that you should get to have a little agency over what happens to you. Would it be possible if we move that meeting till 9? What kind of jerk is gonna be like, no, no, we can't do that. No, it's
Yeah.
not possible.
Yeah, and if you do have a jerky boss that says that's not possible, then there's options, right? Then maybe it's time to go elsewhere. Yeah,
Maybe it's time to vote with your feet. Yeah.
it's time to vote with your feet. Exactly. Where could folks find you? Obviously, they can buy your book. I'm assuming
Yeah.
there's a link for Amazon I can attach into the description. But
Yeah.
where do people find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. I have a mildly unhinged Instagram. I mean, I'm not necessarily good at all the social media stuff. So I have like the fairy god doctor has an Instagram and then I just have my own, which is I think is actually more fun because I'm an open book. And when you read the book, you will really, I mean, there is nothing that I don't talk about. I'm on the web, Denise S. Brown, MD, was my little website. But yeah, the easiest is probably Instagram or LinkedIn, like all the usual spots you can find me. But
Perfect. I will have all of those links in the description in the show notes for people if you want to connect with Dr. Denise Brown. It was so great to have you, and I'm sure I will have you back on the show again because
oh, I'd
there's
love that.
so many ways we can go with this conversation. But I really appreciate you being here today.
Sign me up. I'm ready to go.
And for those who are here and listening all the way to the end here, please, I just want to offer my thank you for being here because without you, we don't have a show. So I appreciate you listening, watching. And if you got anything out of this, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, do all the things because it really does help spread this podcast, this YouTube to all sorts of people just like you who need this kind of content or maybe need a reminder to just take care of themselves. So please send that out. It sends good vibes into the world. And God knows we need lots of good vibes these days. So please do so. In the meantime, folks, until the next time you're with us, just make sure that you stay inspired, stay grounded, and always remember to exhale. Thanks again.